everyone, and welcome to another week of Spike Down. And this week, I know it's repetitive, but I'm going to say it again. We're in episode number 8 this week because last week was actually episode number 7. I just don't know how to count yet, so we're just going to keep it that way. And then now, pew, Men in Black pretend like nothing happened. Back here with Van Stilling, Roy, and we're going to keep it short and sweet, Roy. We're just going to hop right into it. First off, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing excellent, man, but I just can't believe you just lie on air like that. We're never going to keep it short and sweet, Vans. You and I, when we're together, we're just professional yappers. Man. Stop lying to the people. Let's just get through this. It'll take time.
My best, though. I'm going to do my best to try to keep it short and sweet, which is why, we're going to go straight into it and talk about our matches from last week, actually. There's been a couple of cool matches again.
Oh, yeah.
And some matches that went to even upsets. I think, at least when I went to my predictions from last week on the day that I cast it with Ihol, Chiff, and Sierra, I was feeling kind of cool though with my DB upset over Core. But I mean, to me, it doesn't necessarily feel like it was like a big surprise to see Dobros, but I didn't expect for this to be a 2-0 in their favor. So what would you take out of this game?
Honestly, I wish I was as optimistic as you are, man. I did not think Dobros were going to win that at all, to be honest. But I mean, obviously, there's always a world where these matches are close because the competition is just so tight right now. But yeah, a 2-0, not only a 2-0, but a 13-2 on the second map is a little wild. I did not expect that. That's kind of wild.
Very decisive. And that second map, I think it was Lotus, if I'm not mistaken, right? Let me just go back in my notes and check. And that's the crazy part too, because on Lotus, you had Dobros come out with a deadlock and a clove. So first off, let's talk about that deadlock, and I want to know your thoughts about that. And then I want to know in general, like this resurgence of, or this surge, should I say, of clove being picked here in challengers for Lotus. So let's start with deadlock and overall what Dobros looked like. At least I'll start by saying I like what they had on their side in terms of how good they were on spacing and trading as a group. I don't think they were doing anything that was groundbreaking, especially with a composition like that doesn't allow for you to do too many trap plays, except for maybe like the raise, and I think they have a fade in there if I'm not mistaken, right? So maybe in there, yes, but outside of that though, you're just playing some get some information, stall, kind of like defensive style, and I thought it looked pretty good. So what do you think?
No, so I think this like kind of like this style that they played on Lotus is, in my opinion, the best chance that DB is going to have in this tournament, to be honest, because like again, they're not the massively X factor team, right? Like we've sort of talked about this. It's not really a surprise at this point. So I think the style that you're kind of pointing out right here, which is kind of like great utility, great timing, good team play, like that should be the bread and butter for DB. And honestly, it kind of showed. But to go back to the composition question, I kind of like their adaptation to it, right? Because like Viper Nurse, it kind of feels bad to play Viper at the moment, to be honest. But they didn't go to the double initiator composition. They went to a double controller composition still with Omen and Clove. Just kind of interesting because now it opens up the Omen to be a little bit more dually. And like, I mean, what do you have to lose? Like you die, you still have another controller completely, right? And even Clove is kind of like, they're kind of battly as well, right? So, I mean, it's a good composition. The deadlock, I'm still not entirely sold on it, but Drone made it look absolutely amazing. And I think it's just like a factor of like, what the heck? Like, what do we do against this composition? Like, they've never seen it. There's no way they've gotten reps and scrims against that kind of comp, right? Like, it's just a massive X factor in terms of like, what are they going to be up to? How are they going to play this composition? And it seemed like it worked in their favor. I mean, they got 10 rounds on defense Lotus. Exactly. That's one of the hardest halves in the game. Yeah, like that is one of the hardest halves in the game, period. It's kind of wild, dude.
Yeah, especially when the more that I've been watching Deadlock too, and these compositions that are even picked on Sunset, for example, or even an Ascent with Turtle Troop again, it does tend to feel. Actually, we saw Deadlock again this week or last week rather on Bind as well, from a different team. And what I've been noticing is that the composition in itself, rendering with the deadlock, it allows for you to be a little bit more explosive on the attack, even because you're getting a lot of space and you're using this wall very effectively to block off one lane of rotate on the CT side or the defender side when they need to come back and retake the site. So it really gives you a lot of a huge window to really try to set up here in those plays. But ironically enough, here against Core, Dobros didn't even have to use too much of their attack strats here on Lotus. So they have a chance now to pick that map again, let that float, and then maybe try to see, or we could study what they could bring out here on the attack side. But I think you bring a great point, by the way, with them picking up the Clove and the Omen, and I think maybe that's why we're also seeing Clove being picked up by other teams, right? Remember Scuba, we have Riku, of course, and Snarly, the three that I remember vividly that pick Clove right now on Lotus. But I was mentioning in the cast, it was very similar to how like FPX plays triple controller on that map. And as you say, it's bubbles instead of slicing walls. It allows for you to be a lot more battly in those domes and also allowed to dodge a lot of that utility, which I think we've seen a lot of that in that fight as well here for Dobros. Although we haven't seen enough on the attack, but that's probably going to be one of their like win cons too on how they want to scale maps. So I think that was pretty good. Core, I think overall, I mean, yes, it was an upset. Let's put it that way. I was only kidding around with the DB win, where it's not too much of a surprise, but at least if you're looking at the history and the tenure of Core and what they brought out in stage 1, they definitely fell a little bit short, but I don't think that's anything that you should be too alarmed about.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, this kind of bodes well for DB, right? Because they have a lot to prove, and they're going to need every point they can get if they want to squeeze one of the playoff spots. So I mean, this next week will be their test, but we'll probably get to that a little bit later.
Yeah, and if anything, if we want to go into the next match to look after for that happened last week, excuse me, is how do you actually finish maps now? Because I'm talking about the MXS versus Turtle Troop. They had 2 maps where they were doing so well with great starts on whatever half they were playing. I think they started off on defensive side or attack side first on Bind, which was the second map, but I think defensive side on the first one, which I think was Sunset. And they were having awesome leads. But once it turned around, Turtle Troop just found a groove and then just closed it off and won in these upset. And for once, we don't have any fake comebacks actually in these games. And I thought it was pretty cool from the side of Turtle Troop. But what was missing from MXS when you're watching his games that gave you like this inkling of like why is MXS struggling in these moments? Because even a couple of weeks ago when you're looking at stage 1, they actually had slow starts against other teams who were like trailing and whatever, and then would come back and win the map or win the series after losing the first map on top of that, right? So what do you think is bubbling around here, the camp of MXS?
It's honestly kind of hard to say, because when you're looking at it on like a superficial level or like an outside perspective even, there's nothing like glaringly that wrong. Like I can see the logic. They're structuring their rounds pretty well. Like their macros pretty well established. Like, you can clearly see their logic, their ideas flowing. But when it comes to just like that little like oomph, that little like, it's like they've cooked an amazing dish but kind of forgot to put the salt and pepper at the end. You know, like I'm not entirely sure.
But salt and pepper is basic.
But yeah, I mean, yeah. So like, you get what I'm saying though, right? It's like they're not. I can't like just look at them and be like, no, this player is doing bad, or like their post plans are really bad. Like it's really just not that. It's just something is missing. It's kind of hard to pinpoint what it is. Obviously, there were some tweets coming out from Flya saying like he's been having a lot of like mental health issues, and he need, like maybe that's affecting them. Like I don't know. Obviously, I don't want to put it on him by any means, but like of course. He is the IGL, so like if he's struggling mentally, I'm sure like there's probably a lot of friction happening in terms of like strategy and like hesitation and like maybe that's what they're missing. But like I can't even say this was that bad of a loss. Like 11-13, 10-13, like could have gone either way. Like
it just looks weird on paper because they had such a strong lead right at the very beginning, and then the comeback happened towards the mid rounds both of these maps. But I think some positive things out of it when you're looking at it from the point of view of MXS was, I still found that they were still pretty good in terms of understanding how Turtle Troop kind of plays. We still had moments where Stellar is trying to sell fakes with a wingman, but it was still read well by MXS where they didn't over rotate or anything like that either. So they just made sure that the real protocols of the contacts you're starting to understand. So I feel like there's definitely some study that came through, because yes, maybe if you're saying that, from the camp of IGL with Flya, it might be difficult these days, but there's still, a great coaching staff. They still have Mac right at that point, and they do put a lot of work into this. So I mean, they're also sorry, go ahead.
No. I was gonna say like 90% of the IGL's job is done outside the server anyway. Like anyone can call freeze time once the plans are laid out, right? Like at that point, it's just like, okay, how well can we mid round? And then it all comes down to the mid rounding, which obviously the IGL does most of the time, but any player can really step up to the plate. But for another thing for me,
he does super well with Stellar.
Their mid rounding is insane. But another thing, and this is probably the last thing that I point out as like a negative inherently, is like the openers for Moistek Shopify have not really been looking that great. Like Odorous is going 2-7 on the first kills, first deaths. Like you're the Sentinel player, dude. There's no way you're going triple. I'm sorry, but there's no way you're going triple negative on a Sentinel player, and like that's tough, man. Like you're losing your information network. You're losing it's either one, you're losing your Viper on the bind, or you're losing your Cypher on the Sunset, right? Like both of those roles are just so crucial to how the map flows. So I think they're gonna have to tighten up a little bit on like the openers on the Sentinel players. But yeah, that's kind of the last negative thing. But besides that, I mean, everything else was pretty on point. Like Mata, Brock, like got the Broctagon, we got the Mata plays. There's a lot of that going on. And then there's so many clutches that happen on Sunset fans. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 clutches. That includes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 1v2s. 5 1v2s, man.
Unlucky.
What?
Yeah.
What is going on? That's madness. That's actually madness.
What can you do at that point? Right. So yeah, sometimes you just get unlucky, and when players on the other teams are like kind of popping off, and there's nothing you can do. I mean, we saw similar things throughout the whole stage of Shanghai so far. So one day you're shooting, one day you're not, and one team's gonna punish you for it, you know? So that's the crazy part about it in the end. And you can't really, get too attached about the scoreline that towards the end, if it's your favorite team that's unfortunately on the side that suffers the loss, right? But I'm sure it's still a team that's going to bounce back. At the same 100%. Time, they're still, when you're in that when you're having that conversation, MXS is still really up there, anyways, right? But
yeah, they're still a top 3 team. Like
exactly, and I think it bridges well actually into the next topic, which is you were talking about trying to figure out the mold around IGL and stuff like that too. When times are it's hard for you to call. And I think it's something similar here that we could see from the M80 game versus Blinn. So Blinn had a great opportunity to pull up a huge upset, against M80 last week. And they did so in a great fashion, actually. And I think at least when I was watching this game, and I thought in the first place it was just going to be Net trying to call, because I remember when he went as a free agent and he got released here by G2, he was saying, "Hey, I'm down to try out for a new team. Either it's in challengers or in partnership. But at the same time, I want to be a Sentinel player, and I could IGL at a high level." So I thought this was just going to be a slot for Net going in for Nitro. He's played partnership already. He's got that experience. But apparently, from what you're tweeting out here, Roy, the responsibility is actually over on Xander's.
Yeah, I mean, this is
for IGLing.
Yeah, for IGLing specifically. Yeah, exactly. No, what you're saying kind of makes sense, right? Like you would think, okay, Nitro's getting out of the IGL role and the Sentinel role. You would bring in another IGL Sentinel role and just like kind of like plug and play. But I think, I mean, just looking at it from an outside perspective and as a former competitor as well, like it's kind of nerve-wracking to bring in a brand new IGL into a 4-core, like in the middle of the season when like you desperately need as many points as you can to guarantee that spot,
unless you're
right?
Cutie.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to that boy. That boy's crazy.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying though, right? Like it's kind of a hard decision internally, but it's not like Xander is new to the IGL role or like being a vocal player, right? Like he's been almost doing it his entire career, and he's been in IGL before. But yeah, it was a bit of a curveball. But yeah, Blinn getting this win is so massive. It almost feels like a blessing for them, right? Because they got one of their hard matches out of the way and they managed to win it 2-0. But on the other side, like the attack side for M80 looked, you could tell there was a lot of like holes in the calling style, and I think it's just a time thing, man. It's literally just a time game for them. Like they just need time to mesh. They need time to all get on the same page again, adapt to the new calling style, or like maybe have Xander adapt his calling style to try to match Nitro's calling style. Like whatever they're doing internally is up to them. There's many ways out of this situation, but I wouldn't say this is a terrible loss for M80. Like it sucks to lose to blend the newcomers into the league, but again, like 13-11, man. It's like it's not even like that bad.
We did mention that it was going to take a couple of weeks, right, for M80 to try to find their footing coming through. And again, I actually was in the same boat as you, because with the same train of thought that's saying that, okay, well, it doesn't make sense to have an IGL come into a 4-man core and then try to call to the play style of how M80 used to play in the past. But the thing is Net has played a lot against M80 as the guard back in Challengers. That was one thing. And then secondly, that's why when I was watching this game, especially on their attack side of like Breeze, or where they're trying to figure things out on Icebox, when they were trying to default to, like, I'm just going to stick with Icebox because we don't have too much time. So when I was looking at Icebox and I was looking at their attack side, it looked like whenever they tried to default a bit or do a 2-1-2 and try to rework the map or try to find gaps, they were easily punished in those moments where they didn't have enough bodies left when they were playing post plants or even going for a plant in itself. But when it went to like a standard, most of the rounds after, a timeout was like they're just gonna 5-man hit, or they're just gonna 4-1 at the beginning because you still need to throw your Viper Orb towards the middle, and then it just looks a lot better and coordinated, at least in that sense. So as a group for M80 and still having Net in the roster and not having Net watching flanks or Net trying to flank himself, they're just a 5-man hit. They actually look pretty good. So I think ironing that out and getting that out of the way now with the great practice against a team that looked really good in Blinn, by the way. They have such a great support system outside of Okeanos, even if he doesn't pop off. You got Mikey that's owning, Spaz is owning, Monsi's playing a great game as well. So it was not an easy game. It was definitely not an easy game for M80 who has to redefine themselves, I guess, going into last week and into the further week. So it kind of makes sense. I'm on the same boat as you now, noticing here that the attack side's not necessarily lackluster, but there's definitely an adjustment period with
there's just growing pains. There's literally just going to be growing pains. But I mean, a couple things that you touched on was one, Okeanos, he didn't have like the most beautiful, flashiest stat page, but his first kills, first stats were insane. 13 and 4 against some of the best players in the league. Like that, you got to give credit to that boy, man. That Okeanos is going insane. And we kind of talked about it. Like he's sort of the player that levels up to his competition. And I mean, 13 and 4 against M80 is no joke. But I guess my final point on the whole M80 situation is that the only thing for me that kind of concerns me is that Xander has been statistically like M80's most consistent and top performer. And then now he's put on a very stressful role, the IGL role. And again, this is his first match. So again, growing pains, yes. But he performed the worst in this match. Of course, and like now you're losing your star player, controller player, and you're putting him on 1 an IGL role, 2 in a very stressful role. Like that is definitely going to impact his performance, right? Like there's just no way around him, and not many people have figured out the high frag and consistent IGL. You know what I mean? And
I think it's going to come though, because again, for sure. He's playing a role that gives us an opportunity, that gives him an opportunity to do what he needs to do to set up the basic stuff. So let's say, again, for example, they're going to play Icebox. He's playing Viper, right? So he places the orb, he places the default wall, then tries to call. But if you know, it doesn't go well and it doesn't bode well for M80 within the round, he still has the opportunity to now just focus on himself and be in those clutch moments where he's been so good at in the previous weeks when Nitro was still calling for the team, right? I just remember vividly when they're playing Breeze, for example, he's just popping off in like 3Ks and like helping out the team, being the support system towards the end and winning those rounds and closing out those rounds. So if he's able to find a little bit more comfort into understanding how the state of the game is happening within the game in itself or within match day, I think it gives him an opportunity now to actually look like the next John Cutie, because when things not going well here for Sentinels and they're going into a site and John Cutie's in a 1 versus 3, he's going to clutch it out. So I think, again, just a pain point, but a small one, I think, for the role of Xander. I don't think the responsibility given to him is going to hinder his stats or his performances for that much longer. I think he's going to look pretty good here for this week.
I hope so. They're going to need that.
Exactly. I'm knocking on wood on that one for sure. They're going to need it, of course. Thankfully, they still have a lot of cushions, right, with the circuit points that they currently have. So far, so good. But, you know, time's ticking, and the alarm might start sounding very soon if we get to the 3rd week and 4th week, and they're still winless here in that stage 2. That's when we're going to have to maybe start like digging a little bit deeper and trying to figure out those gaps. But at least now looking at the next game that played last week was the Oxygen versus TSM. I think now, you know, there was a possibility once again here for TSM to take this into a 3rd map against, if not one of the top 2 best teams here in Challengers in Oxygen Esports, if not the best right now. And I wanted to know your thoughts. Does TSM look good now? Do they look like they fixed their stuff from stage 1? Can they actually now make it quite easily into the top 8, into the playoffs now of Challengers?
easily is in question. They can definitely clinch one of the spots. I don't know if easy is the word I would use, to be honest. It's a bit of a there's a lot of good teams. There's a lot of good teams in challengers. But yes, on your point though, I do think TSM looks much better. That is number one. I also do think that Sim is starting to get into the system a lot better because, and I mean, just statistically speaking, like even on a completely superficial level, ignoring strategy, like he is starting to perform much better. His kill to death ratio is shining extremely well. His ADR, his his stats, just overall, the system is kicking in. And again, TSM did swap their IGLs for this stage. So they're GMDs now, I think, instead
GMD,
of Poise.
Instead of Poise.
So yeah, I think they're starting to gear up a little bit, but it's still a 2-0 loss to Oxygen at the end of the day. Like no matter how close it was, I mean, the second map was OT, but it's still a loss. It's a heartbreaking loss, but it's still a 2-0 for Oxygen, and TSM is gonna have to clinch every win from here pretty much.
Yeah, there's been some moments where I love the boy, but I'm gonna point pin.
Oh, we're roasting someone.
Some moment. No, sorry for Poised for you.
Okay.
Oh my god.
I'm down. Just let me know. No, I'm just kidding.
He's back with the dad jokes. I love it. I love it. This early in the morning for me, at least, I'm loving it so far. I'm sleepless. We'll be watching Masters Shanghai, the grand final.
Oh yeah, you're on the grind. I respect that.
That was sick, by the way. You guys have to watch that if you mean sleeping. But nonetheless, to get back to that topic of somebody that I have to pinpoint on that bind map was Poised, because I praised him as when they play on bind and is able to play a Sky. Like, I mean, you used to be a Sky main pretty much, and you know how good you know how to identify good Sky players, and I'm pretty sure you would agree here that Poise would be one of them. But unfortunately, there was a couple of moments where he or overheated or didn't use enough util to support his team that resulted in a couple of these losses where it was pivotal for them to close it out because they lost in overtime, right? So there was a possibility of bringing this to a third map if it was possible, and it was going to be a map that maybe they could even continue forward and upset Oxygen in. But that's my 2 cents on that. There's been a little bit of those fundamental issues sometimes where I guess some players in TSM feel that they still have to make a heroic play, and that kind of like just bites them in the end, and it just lets that lead that they've built slip within the round in itself.
I mean, supporting that point.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to cut you off, but supporting that point, I think you're absolutely right, because the stats are also matching up with what is actually happening, right? Like on bind specifically, GMD had 2 1v1s, a Proto had a 1v1, and 7 had a 1v2. That's 4 clutches that they've had to close out to even bring it into OT, right? Yeah. Versus Oxygen's 1 clutch by Dapper, it was a 1v1. That was it. That was the only clutch they needed to close out that series, versus like TSM's where they had to have multiple players step up in like pretty late round situations for them to even bring that close. So no, I think you're onto something for sure.
Yeah, and at least hopefully they'll be able to fix this out. I mean, we're going into week 3, if I'm not mistaken. There's 6 weeks. And as I've mentioned before, too, for their goal is going to be very similar to everybody that's currently fighting in the mid pack, just to try to make it into the top 8, right? So they're still kind of like at the bottom of the circuit points right now. So getting a couple of these wins going into stage 2 will definitely help in their placing and hopefully make it across that finish line. But if not, one team that's currently doing it here and finding results compared to stage 1 is YFP. YFP's been looking really good so far, and their game versus Winthrop University had a lot of eyes.
Yes.
I saw a lot of pros just hanging out in the chat, just watching to see how Kyle was going to do and to see if they could get inspired by the results here of Kyle in that game, right? So, what's your take on YFP for this week? I think
you're so Van Silly. You're so Van Silly. I love it.
Yeah, nobody's gonna get the joke.
Like is gonna jump on that bait.
Yeah. Wow, that was a lot. That was a lot to unpack. So unzipping that one. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right though. What YFP is looking, I don't know. The biggest turnaround in VCL history is either in YFP's hands or it's in Dobro's hands. I'm not sure right now. Yeah. I think the next week we'll probably start to tell the story a little bit better. But that was a massive win, 13-5, 13-6. Not only was it convincing, but you can clearly tell that they are actually playing on a very different level than they did in the previous stage, to be honest. Their strategy is really good. Their IGL system's kicking in. You know, they have shooters in every role now, which they did before, but now it just feels kind of a little bit more inspired. And yeah, they're kind of unscrewing themselves.
Sorry, I'm just trying to go back. Who plays Sentinels here? Yeah, Thief. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Right? No, joking aside, though, I think you're right. I think it's very similar to the storyline of Blinn, where, you know, a lot of it. If I think about Penny in the past, and Penny when he was grinding the circuit with Xset back in with version 1,
version V1.
Yeah, the V1 with FEs and all them. There was a lot of responsibility on FEs to just try to pop off in those moments, and when it didn't, then it was just like, oh, it's gonna crumble or whatnot. But Penny has found his groove. I think he looks really good in those moments, but he doesn't have to, deadlift the whole team every single game or squat the whole team every single game, because they added the extra firepower of Jake and also of Will. Thief looks like he's playing amazingly so far with this roster as well. So it's just like when you're seeing this and you have less stress now on your shoulders of being like, I don't need to go in and have my 1 or 2 every single time. I could also not succeed and still have my team back me up. I think it adds a lot of confidence to the YFP team and overall here for the strategy they're going to build behind this to continue to build upon that brick by brick and look pretty good in this stage. I feel like so far though, Roy, we're talking about a lot of these games that, every single team can kind of look kind of good. Is there anybody from looking at last week's games that you feel that the alarms are sounding and you're like, oh, they're gonna have to start looking after their stuff and really pick up the slack?
Yeah, like teams that are looking a little tough right now.
Yeah,
teams that are down bad even.
Very down bad.
Yeah. Yeah, so the down bad teams right now, in my opinion, are Winthrop University and SAD Esports.
Okay.
SAD Esports. Yeah, I mean, they didn't have great placements last stage, and they didn't do extremely well in the midseason cup. And now that we're going to stage 2, and they really need as many points as possible if they want to challenge one of the positions. But yeah, it's looking a little tough for them right now. Again, it's really unfortunate. It is a time game, but it is what it is for now. But yeah, SAD Esports is another team. I don't think they're particularly playing bad. It's just, they had serious roster changes and serious, not only roster changes, but like responsibility transfer. Like we have Darkus in the IGL role now, right? Like you brought in Alvin Boy, who's never played in VCL before. You just brought in Dip as well. Like there's so many like shuffling happening. And unfortunately, time is not in their favor. Yeah. Do they have a new coach? I'm not even sure who it is, to be honest.
Coach Joe joined.
Coach Joe. Oh, nice. Yeah.
So
okay,
Joe was there, announced last week with Dip and Alvin Boy. So no, I fully agree with you. That it's that plus a change of an IGL system. It's crazy. So because
it's a lot. It's just a lot.
You have a mentality of Darkest, of like him being a correct initiator, although still putting great numbers as a KO in any initiator that he plays.
Hard to
try an IGL for a team. And then you have a coach that brings in a whole different system as well, because he's been coaching around the game changer scene for a bit with Complexity GX3 as the assistant coach as well, going through. So that adds another thing. Then you have Dip as well, that if he needs to be vocal about something, he's going to add another point of view. So there is a lot of
so many voices.
So a lot of checkbox to mark up, and I think they're going to have to start trusting each other as well to just have. To trust Darkest calls, or at least a game plan going into it as well, because at least I still see that there's some value in the timeouts that Coach Joe is currently calling, and they're able to salvage a couple of these rounds. But overall, I think trusting a game plan going through and just trusting that Alvin's going to find his groove as a sentinel role outside of a duelist role that everybody always talks about. Like, hey, how come Alvin's not playing duelist? I think they might have a chance to maybe squeeze through that 8th spot here, because again, we have 4 weeks left. All right, we're going into week 3. So 3, 4, 5, 6. I count on my fingers just to make sure I knew how to count. So we got 4 weeks left going into that. Dude, it's late. It's late right now.
I'll spare you. I'll spare you this time
for SAD Esports.
Yeah.
But going on through, I think we've covered pretty much all those games going in from last week. But I wanna start prefacing this week, actually. So with the results that we saw from last week and how we continue to see a great uphill climb here for TTR and Oxygen, do you think they're starting to separate themselves from the rest? Because we consistently had these conversations of top three, and then suddenly TTR squeezes in, and then we have a conversation of a top four. But then after MSC and going to stage 2, has this now been split to just a top 2 and then another gap for another 2 and then the rest? So more specifically, I'm looking at TT, right? Oxygen, TTR, and then you have M80, MXS with a little gap in between for those 4 places, and then a gap a little bit for the rest. How do you see this so far?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with the top 2. I think Oxygen and Turtle Troops are like undeniably the 2 best looking teams. Not only are they the best looking, but the most consistent performing as well. So that, in my opinion, are just immediate number 1, number 2. I don't know which order. I think I might have to give number 1 to Oxygen, but Turtle Troop is looking amazing, and so is Oxygen. I genuinely, I know this sounds really bad to say, but I don't know if I actually consider M80 a top 4 team right now or not. Like, it's hard to justify that.
I'm almost like I kind of agree with you in that sense, but it's hard for me to not to I agree with you, but it's hard for me to fully agree with you because it's also M80. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
They're the team that won everything last year in Challengers, and then unfortunately lost where it mattered the most in the grand finals of Ascension. But I don't even think they dropped a single series going into last year. So and leading into that moment in the playoffs. So they were that team to beat. They got beaten. And since they got beaten and lost a couple of players like EU and John Cutie, they unfortunately haven't found that same type of flow, which is really, really, it hurts me to say, right? It hurts me to like even say that out loud, but I'm really hoping for this team to turn it around. And I definitely do think they have, the right pieces, but what's missing is, I think we're going to have to wait and see, right? For this week, once they're going to play their games. Just to see if there's going to have to be that red alert button for us to push and start dissecting a little bit more what's been going on here in at least the what we currently see from an outside perspective, watching these games. What are these gaps? What are the issues? And what do we think they need to fix? Hopefully it's not going to get to that, but at least we have a chance now to look at these matches that are going to be coming up here for week number 3. So starting off here on Wednesday, June 12th, we're going to do predictions at the same time where we're going through these, Roy. So we have YFP versus Turtle Troop. And then Blinn Esports versus SAD Esports. I think that's going to be a very fun day. As you're talking about, SAD Esports having a little bit of trouble in the waters right now, and they're going to have to fight now against the Buccaneers, right? So trouble in the waters.
Let's go chronologically. You're getting a little too excited, Vans. You're going a little too excited here. Let's just go chronologically one by one. Let's start with YFP versus Turtle Troops. Fine. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll go first for that one, and then you can go first for the second game, okay?
Okay.
I will give my prediction, and then I'm going to give my TLDR for my opinions on that match. Okay. So I think in the YFP versus Turtle Troop game, I think Turtle Troops is going to win. I still think they're the best looking team, especially with We Did now coming back to play in stage 2. They're looking amazing. So I'm going to give it to Turtle Troop. I will say, though, that I do think this match could go either way. And I also do think this match could be very close, even if it is a 2-0 for either team. But that being said, like, I'm here for the ride. Like, I want YFP to be like, yo, sell me the story. I'm all about a good story. Like, show me that you guys are about to turn it completely around. And this is the first test, fans. If they beat Turtle Troops, which I have been saying, they're Turtle Troops, top 2 team in the league, right? Yeah, if YFP beats them, they're kind of selling a good story. I kind of like what they're 100%. Selling me at that point.
If this was a tweet with a lot of characters, because you have the blue check mark, all I have to do is retweet that, because I agree with every single point that you just said on that one as well. So, and I think to add on top of that, so I'll add a quote retweet. I'll add the extra point that actually when you have these timeouts and you look at Turtle Troop and you look at the webcams, looks like he's just towering over you like this every time, You're like intimidated by Turtle Troop when you're watching these games. So I'm like,
how do you beat a giant, dude?
Exactly, dude. I feel like, okay, I'm gonna just sit back and just enjoy the show and just watch Turtle Troop beat YFP for this week. So
I love that.
I agree with you on that one. So Turtle Troop for the win. YFP, if they get this one, it will be an amazing upset for sure. And then now we get a chance to talk about Buccaneers and SAD Esports. I just call him Buccaneers because it's a pirate hat, right? So trouble in the waters for SAD Esports, but now they're going to have to battle on the waters against pirates. And you know how pirates are with their cannons and everything. They always own the seas. So this is going to be a difficult one for sure, with so many things to fix around to still work on rather than to fix, because they still have to figure out their identity here for SAD Esports. It's a great opportunity for them to potentially get this because technically on paper and head to head, if you're looking at every single one of these players in their roles, they're still kind of close and it could still put a lot of good impact, right? If you're just thinking of like Skarn versus Okeanos, for example, as your duelist, it'll look pretty good, right? So I still think they are at this point, though, that Blinn will have this in a 2-0 fashion.
Oh, 2-0, clean 2-0. Okay. I mean, I resonate with that. I think Blinn will also take that one. I don't know how convincing it's going to be, to be honest, but these players have a lot of experience playing against each other, right? They're not the first time they play against each other in a match environment. So I think it technically could go either way, but I'm definitely like leaning towards Blinn as well.
Awesome.
We are aligned.
Awesome. So then the stars align, of course, with the two superstars on the show, right? Vansili and Roy. So as they align, we agree on those predictions. I don't know why I just follow you down on the list. You're going to do any sound, I'm just going to follow you at this point. Thursday, June 13th, we have Fluffy Aimers versus TSM. So I'm going to let you lay it all out and give me your 2 cents on who you think is going to take this.
Yeah, so Fluffy Aimers is actually a team that we have not really been talking that much about, but they've been on like the very sleep run. They're just slowly improving. They're in their own lane. They're kind of doing their own thing. They had a clean victory last week. Against SAD Esports. It was a 2-0. They are looking solid, but my intuition is still saying that TSM, they almost defeated Oxygen, who we said was a #1 team in the league, and TSM is definitely on the uptrend, although the results have not been showing that. I think TSM will have this one. Yeah,
I agree with you that Fluffy Aimers are kind of like the sleeper pick, or just like the chilling team. They're kind of like my Luminosity Gaming of 2021. Every time you were looking at every team playing an open bracket and you're just like, oh man, Sentinels are playing. TSM, when did they play? Oh, 100 Thieves. And then it's just like, oh, LG's playing. Okay, LG made top 8 again. Oh, okay. Oh, LG made top 4 again. Oh, okay. So they're just like consistently good, but just like trying to find that moment where they could be a little bit more in that conversation. But yeah, I do agree that this is going to be should be a TSM being able to take this. Although,
my God,
you know what? No, I'm going to go against you. I'm going to go against you for this one. I usually gas up TSM all the time as well, but I just feel that because of that reason that they're just consistently good and they'll have good games, they'll have bad games, but when they're actually good, they could upset any team. They're the gatekeepers, I think, right now of challengers. That's
a hot take in itself.
That's going to prevent our teams to make it into the top 8. I think Fluffy Aimers is going to be that team. So I'm going to go with the upset against TSM for that one because of that. And GM is going to hate me.
You better have that in your prediction sheet. And not just saying that on the air. That's all I'm saying.
You know what? I think I've already filled it up, so I'm going to have to refill it and put Fluffy Aimers. So I'll make sure I change that. So Keith, if you're watching this, Keith Effelton, just look back at the forums, delete the first one, and get my new one in. Thank you. Then after the 7 p.m. match on Thursday, June 13th, is Oxygen Esports and Dobros. Is that easy?
Another opportunity, fans.
Is that easy to predict? Yeah, it's easy to predict.
Yeah. But Dobros did show up. I don't know, but what if they're on the Magic Juice, fans? I don't know. They could be on that Spirit Water. I have no idea. But if they are, this is like the same story as YFP, right? Like you're playing against the two giants. You want to make a statement. You want to raise the morale of the team. You want to level up. This is the level 60 monster you have to defeat at level 40. So
listen,
do your best.
Like I said, they have James Hayes, the Wisdom Cobb, as their coach right now.
Oh, that's true. I kind of almost forgot about that.
Dude, in that game on Lotus, right? I think they were winning 3-0 in the so they converted their bonus round. And then as soon as they lost one round, they called an instant timeout. And I found that it was quite interesting because it had my head scratching because they were still looking pretty good fundamentally when it comes down to those moments of how they were trading, how they were spacing, and how they're just playing some good, honest Valorant of retake place. And I think in that interview towards the end with Sierra Dawn, Drone was mentioning, James just felt like he needed to call a timeout just to make sure that we needed to iron out these couple of things in our fundamentals. So it was actually quite interesting because that tells me that if you're calling a timeout that early to work on those small things to maximize your play style and your gameplay on defense, you're coming in with a sound game plan against the team that you're playing against. So I think this could be like, James is taking this to heart, and with the rest of the teams is believing in the vision of James here, coaching it out. I think they might come up with a good game plan against his old team, right? Like Hayes used to play for TSM as well and used to IGL for that team as well. Maybe not the full roster, but at least has that experience with some of those players within that roster, right? So I feel that he has a good or potentially a good read into what TSM could bring. And of Oxygen, at that point, because I'm looking back at a TSM game from before. But the story still stands where he has that tenure of the IGL and being able to bring out a sound game plan to study what Oxygen could bring and bring that fight against them towards the end. So,
well, then let me get this straight. So you just gave me this whole spiel, and then you're still gonna vote Oxygen here.
Yeah, because it's gonna be a close loss. It's gonna be a close loss.
Oh, okay.
Dude, I sound like you last week. This team has so many good potential things, but they're still gonna lose.
Yeah, they're still. Let's just say that's what it is. You know, unlucky. But yeah, no, Oxygen's top 2 team.
Yeah, exactly. But the hard one to predict so far is the Friday game, right? The first one, so the Core versus M80. Because that one's kind of hard to predict. Again, on paper, it should be M80, but M80's shaky. Core is all right. Good days, bad days too. But I feel that this prediction is more just a gut feeling than anything else, right? Where you just leave it to chance. At least to,
what's your gut saying, Vance?
I'm gonna go with M80.
You're so silly. I love that.
It's in my name.
Oh my god. Yeah, dude. I'm honestly, normally I actually might have gone with Core in normal circumstances, considering the situation that M80 finds themselves in. Like, dude, in context, M80's the 5th out of 6 teams in their group right now. That's the only person that's below M80 is Sad Esports.
Yeah,
Winthrop is higher than M80 in the group right now.
Yeah.
In any other context, I actually might have picked Core. Yeah. I might have picked Core in any other situation, but they did not look great against Dobros last week, and that's kind of thrown me off. If they had looked amazing against Dobros, I feel like I would have been very confident to choose Core, but their match against Core was just not very inspiring, to be honest, and I just will give it to M80. But in any other context, I might have given it to Core.
If it was a Core team it was the Core that beat Oxygen towards that week number 4 or 5 or something like that, then I would believe in that. But I do agree with you, because now going into stage 2, strong starts, lots of confidence, and then just got shut down in the other 2 maps, right? Because they looked really good, at least on their Sunset game, and then that was it after. Like, it just went and that was against even the Turtle Troop game from last week. So that should have been a game where, like I said, when probably like all the other underdogs, like whenever they're popping off, they could actually really upset the top teams, but they couldn't close it out. So I think in that sense, if they're going to be on that continuous slow start, there's a chance here for M80. Last but not least, this one's hard too, actually. MXS versus Winthrop.
Is it?
Who you got for this one?
Is it really that hard, Vince?
No.
Let's just go on 3.
1,
right, 1, 2, 3.
MXS.
Moist, next shot fight. Yep.
There you go.
All right.
There's VMix, whatever. This was still pretty even, right? We'll stop it there. At least I don't think we need to talk about it too much. I think you just mentioned with everything from Winthrop before, that they were they part of your struggling teams? That's crazy that you think that Winthrop's going to be part of your 2 struggling teams with Sad Esports and Winthrop.
Yeah, I mean,
but you know what? I'll respect you for it. That's why you're on the desk and giving your opinion right here. So.
Listen, I'm always trying to be proven wrong. Like, I have no issues with being like, hey, I was wrong. Just show me the truth, and I'll believe it. I'm just that guy. I'm just that simple.
Yeah. Well, let us know at least in chat, because I know you've been watching this before we start the games on this week, and also if you're watching this on social media on our socials, and you can comment below. Let us know your thoughts if we're off the goop, if we're right on point, or if there's something that you disagree. But if not, that was basically the week number 8 right now for Spike Down, and we'll see you next week for episode number 9.